On the 8th of March 2014, I found myself seated within a clandestine military radar installation hidden somewhere in the reaches of Southeast Asia, monitoring the airspace that stretched above the Indian Ocean. My role as a radar technician had become something anonymous and unremarkable, surrounded by countless monitors and lights that blinked incessantly in every direction I turned my gaze. 6 years had passed since I first took on this work, and it had become ordinary beyond measure, involving nothing more than tracking international commercial flights as they traverse their designated airspace corridors and observing military operations confined to their authorized zones, with occasional civilian aircraft straying into restricted areas. Nothing of consequence had ever occurred until that particular night arrived. My duty shift commenced at 1:20 in the morning, and if you were to step inside the radar room of a military facility that technically does not exist in any official capacity, you would encounter walls constructed from solid concrete with no windows whatsoever and 12 radar stations arranged in 2 parallel rows, while the air conditioning unit hummed without pause in its effort to combat the heat generated by all the equipment, and the scent of coffee that had sat too long in its pot permeated the air. There was also that distinctive green luminescence emanating from the screens that gave everyone present the appearance of animated corpses. Sergeant Marcus occupied the console position next to mine, and he was a decent man who had formerly served as an Air Force pilot before washing out during his training phase and finding himself assigned to a desk rather than a cockpit. He never voiced complaints about this outcome, but you could sense it troubled him deeply. He would track each aircraft with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was imagining himself up there flying instead of merely observing from the ground. Major Rahman served as the commanding officer on duty that night, embodying the strict military archetype, who conducted everything according to established protocols. He had served in the military for 23 years and possessed that rigid bearing that comes from decades of following orders without question. I held respect for him even if I did not particularly like him on a personal level. The first hour of my shift proceeded in a completely normal fashion, as I tracked 17 commercial flights, along with 3 cargo planes and 2 military transport aircraft. Everything was precisely where it should have been, following established flight paths and maintaining proper altitude and speed. My coffee had grown cold, and I was thinking about the basketball game I had missed in order to come in for this shift. Then at 1:21 in the morning, something changed fundamentally. Sergeant Marcus called out from his console with a voice that was casual rather than concerned, saying he had a transponder dropout on Malaysia Airlines 370. Transponder failures happen regularly enough due to equipment malfunctions or electrical problems, and usually the transponder comes back online within a few minutes. I pulled up the flight on my screen and saw it was a Boeing 777 on a flight path from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, carrying 239 people on board. The aircraft had been transmitting normally, and then suddenly, the civilian transponder signal simply stopped. I asked how long it had been out, and Marcus replied about 90 seconds, while already running diagnostic protocols suggesting it could be a system failure or possibly pilot error shutting down the wrong equipment. But here is the thing that nobody wants to discuss, and here is the part that has been consuming me from within for 10 years. The civilian transponder stopped transmitting, yes, but our military radar systems that were classified and designed to track everything in this airspace, regardless of whether it was broadcasting, its identification never lost that plane for a single second. I could see it clearly displayed on my screen as the aircraft was still, they're still flying, still showing up as a solid radar return at 35,000 feet. The only difference was that it was no longer identifying itself to civilian air traffic control. To the civilian world, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had just vanished into thin air, but to us sitting in that classified facility with equipment that was not supposed to exist, the plane was perfectly visible. Marcus asked Major Rahman, who had moved over to observe our screens, whether he should notify civilian air traffic control, and Raman said quietly that we should wait to see if the transponder comes back online. We waited 2 minutes, then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, and the transponder stayed dark, but the plane kept flying. That is when I noticed something that made my stomach drop with a sickening feeling. The aircraft was not maintaining its established flight path to Beijing, but was turning instead. A slow, deliberate turn to the west, back toward the Malay Peninsula. This was not erratic flying, and this was not the chaotic path of a plane experiencing trouble. This was controlled and intentional behavior, indicating that someone in that cockpit was flying that plane exactly where they wanted it to go. I called out to the major, keeping my voice steady, even though my pulse was racing, and informed him that the aircraft was deviating from its filed flight plan and was turning west. Raman leaned over my console, studying the radar return with his face illuminated by that green glow from the screen. And I could see something in his expression that I had never seen before, which was not surprise or confusion, but recognition. He knew something, and he had been expecting this to happen. He said simply to continue tracking and to activate the secure communication protocols. Secure communication protocols was military code for shut up and do not talk about what you are seeing. It meant everything we observed from this point forward was classified at the highest levels possible. It meant if I discussed this with anyone outside this room, I could be charged with treason. For the next hour, I watched that plane execute a series of maneuvers that were absolutely impossible for a commercial aircraft experiencing any kind of emergency situation. The flight path was precise and calculated as the aircraft turned south following waypoints that were not part of any commercial air corridor. It climbed and descended and maintained altitudes that suggested someone was deliberately trying to avoid detection by civilian radar installations. But our military systems tracked every move, every turn, every altitude change. We had that plane on our screens as clearly as if it were broadcasting its position with full transponder functionality. Marcus said with his voice tighter now and more controlled that he was picking up additional contacts, and I switched my display to match his configuration, and my blood ran cold with fear. 2 additional aircraft had appeared on our screens approaching from the northwest, and they were not broadcasting transponder codes either, but their radar signatures suggested military jets that were fast and maneuvering with precision, and they were closing on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Raman asked if Marcus could identify those contacts, and Marcus ran the radar signatures through our identification database before responding negative, sir, and explaining that the profiles did not match any known commercial or civilian aircraft, and that the configuration suggested fighter jets, but he could not determine nationality or origin. We all understood what that meant without anyone having to spell it out explicitly. Unidentified military aircraft operating without transponders in international airspace, intercepting a commercial airliner that had just gone dark. This was not an accident, and this was not a malfunction. This was an operation being conducted with precision and purpose. The 2 unknown aircraft took up positions on either side of the Malaysian flight, not in a threatening or aggressive manner, but they were escorting it with clear intent. 3 aircraft flying in formation over the Indian Ocean at 1:40 in the morning, and according to every civilian radar system in the region, none of them existed in any official capacity. That is when Captain David Miller walked into the radar room as an intelligence officer who was the kind of person who knew things that made other people uncomfortable in his presence. He did not report to Major Raman, but instead reported to people so far up the chain of command that we never even learned their names or positions. Miller walked directly to Raman and handed him a sealed envelope that was a black folder with multiple classification stamps representing the kind of document that gets people disappeared if they read it without proper authorization. Raman opened it and read the single page inside, and his face went completely blank and expressionless. Raman addressed the room saying that the aircraft we had been tracking was now under special operations oversight, and that all data from this point forward was classified compartmentalized information, and that we would not discuss this observation with anyone outside this room, and would not include it in standard radar logs, and would transfer all tracking responsibilities to Captain Miller immediately. I could not stop myself from speaking up and saying that there were 239 people on that plane and asking if it was in trouble or if there was some kind of hijacking situation, whether we should not be coordinating with search and rescue operations. Miller looked at me with eyes that suggested he had seen things that would give me nightmares for the rest of my life, and stated that the situation was being handled through appropriate channels and that my responsibility was to follow orders and maintain operational security, and he asked if that was clear to me. It was clear and crystal clear in its implications. We were not there to help anyone, and we were not there to rescue anyone. We were there to watch and to document and to keep our mouths shut about what we had observed taking place. For the next 3 hours, I tracked that plane as it flew south over the Indian Ocean, with the 2 escort aircraft staying with it the entire time, maintaining perfect formation. At one point around 2:30 in the morning, the Malaysian flight descended to a lower altitude, and the escort aircraft adjusted their positions accordingly, with everything about the operation suggesting coordination and communication and purpose behind every movement. At 3:15 in the morning, Captain Miller received a secure communication through his encrypted radio, and he listened for maybe 30 seconds before acknowledging with a simple "understood," and then he turned to address the room with instructions. All personnel were to stop active tracking immediately and transfer all recorded data to secure storage and then purge it from our consoles. This observation never happened, and this shift was routine with no unusual aircraft activity. Everyone in this room would sign additional non-disclosure agreements before leaving this facility. There were no questions asked by anyone. Nobody asked questions because what were we supposed to ask? Where did the plane go, and what was being transported that required a military escort? And why were 239 innocent people being used as cover for whatever operation this really was? Sergeant Marcus tried, and God love him, he actually tried to get answers from the authorities. He addressed the captain carefully but with determination, asking about the families and about the passengers, saying they deserved to know what happened. Miller interrupted him with a voice like ice, asking what exactly the sergeant thought they deserved to know, and stating that Marcus would follow orders and would sign the documents and would never speak of this again. The families would be told what they needed to be told through official channels, and the sergeant's opinion on what they deserved was not relevant to operational security. I watched the expression on Marcus's face as he realized the full scope of what we were being asked to do. We were not just keeping military secrets, but we were participating in a lie that would affect hundreds of families directly. People who would spend years wondering what happened to their loved ones, and people who would never get closure because we had been ordered to pretend we had never seen anything at all. As I transferred my radar data to the secure drives and then watched the purge protocols erase every trace of that night's observations from my console, I made a choice that would define everything that followed. I saved a backup on a tiny flash drive hidden in my pocket with copies of the radar tracks and the timestamps and the escort aircraft signatures and everything I had witnessed. I knew it was treason, and I knew I could spend the rest of my life in prison if anyone found out what I had done, but I could not let this disappear completely from existence. The official story broke the following morning with news that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had lost contact with air traffic control without any distress signal or emergency beacon transmission. The plane had simply vanished somewhere over the South China Sea, according to all reports. Search and rescue operations were being coordinated with prayers offered for the families and hopes expressed for survivors. And I sat there in my apartment watching the news coverage while knowing that everything they were saying was a complete lie. The plane had not vanished over the South China Sea at all, but had flown for hours after losing transponder contact. It had been escorted by unidentified military aircraft, and someone somewhere knew exactly where it had gone and what had happened to everyone on board. But that is not even the worst part of this entire nightmare. The worst part came 3 days later when I was called into a private meeting with Captain Miller and 2 men I had never seen before in my life. They wore civilian clothes, but they carried themselves with the rigid posture of career military personnel. Intelligence services most likely representing the kind of people who make problems disappear permanently. They did not threaten me directly because they did not need to resort to such crude methods. They simply laid out a folder on the table containing surveillance photographs, including pictures of my apartment and my car and my girlfriend Sarah at her job at the hospital, and my parents' house in the suburbs where my younger sister still lived while finishing college. One of the men said with a voice that was calm and conversational, as if we were discussing the weather, that these were the people I cared about, and these were the people whose safety depends on my continued discretion regarding the events of March 8th. I told them I had signed the non-disclosure agreement, and I had not told anyone anything about what I witnessed. The second man replied that they knew this, and they wanted to make sure it stayed that way, because if information about that night ever becomes public, or if anyone ever traces a leak back to me, then these people in the photographs would experience what he called unfortunate accidents. My girlfriend's car might have brake failure, he explained. My parents' house might have a gas leak. My sister might encounter someone in a parking garage who does not take no for an answer. He asked if I understood what they were telling me, and I understood perfectly. They were not just asking for my silence, but were holding my entire world hostage to ensure I never spoke about what I had witnessed that night. For the next 6 months, I lived in a state of constant paranoia, where every time my phone rang I expected it to be news that something had happened to Sarah or my family. Every time I saw a car following too close behind me, I wondered if this was the day they decided I was too much of a liability to keep alive. The surveillance never stopped, and sometimes it was obvious and meant to remind me they were watching. Other times it was subtle enough that I could almost convince myself I was imagining things. But the real torture was watching the media coverage of the disappearance, with families crying at press conferences and begging for information. Experts speculated about what might have happened, while massive search operations covered thousands of square miles of ocean, looking for debris in areas where I knew the plane had never been. And through it all, I had to stay silent and had to pretend I knew nothing, and had to watch innocent people suffer while protecting information that could have given them closure. The breaking point came 8 months after the disappearance, when I was having coffee with Marcus at a cafe near the base. We had not talked about that night since it happened because we had both been too scared to risk it. But something in his eyes told me he was struggling with the same guilt that was eating me alive from the inside. He asked quietly, while stirring his coffee without drinking it, whether I ever thought about what we saw that night. I admitted that I thought about it every day and every single day without exception. Marcus said he could not do this anymore, and I could hear the desperation in his voice when he said he could not live with this lie any longer. Those families deserve to know the truth, he insisted. Those people on that plane deserve to have their story told to the world. I leaned closer and dropped my voice to barely above a whisper, telling Marcus he could not do what he was thinking because he knew what they would do to him. He said he did not care anymore, and I could see in his expression that he meant it completely. He would rather be dead than keep living like this, he explained while watching those families suffer as we sat on information that could help them. It was not right, and it was not human, he said. I should have talked him down from this decision and should have reminded him about the threats and the surveillance and the very real danger he would be putting himself and everyone he cared about in if he went public with this information. But part of me was relieved that someone else was finally saying what I had been thinking for months. I asked him what he was going to do, and Marcus said he was going to contact a journalist who was independent and someone who could protect sources. He was going to tell them everything we saw that night, including the continued tracking and the escort aircraft and the cover-up and all of it. I told him flatly that they would kill him and asked if he understood that. He agreed that they probably would, but said at least he would die knowing he tried to do the right thing, and at least those families would have some answers finally. We finished our coffee in silence, and when we parted ways in the parking lot, Marcus gripped my shoulder and said that if anything happens to him, I would know it was not an accident, and maybe that would give me the courage to finish what he started. 2 weeks later, Marcus died in a single vehicle car accident on a rural road near the base. The official report said he had been driving too fast and lost control on a curve and crashed into a tree. No other vehicles were involved, and there were no witnesses to the incident, just a tragic accident, according to all official accounts. But I knew better than to believe that story. The road where he crashed was a straight section with perfect visibility, and Marcus was a trained pilot with reflexes honed by years of military service. He did not lose control of his car by accident. And the timing, coming exactly 4 days after he told me about his plan to contact a journalist, was too convenient to be coincidental. I attended Marcus's funeral in a state of numb horror, as his parents were there, devastated by the loss of their only son. His girlfriend of 3 years was crying so hard she could barely stand upright. His little niece, who was maybe 5 years old, kept asking why Uncle Marcus was not waking up. And I stood there knowing that he had been murdered to protect a secret that I was now carrying alone. Captain Miller was at the funeral too, standing in the back and watching everything. When our eyes met across the cemetery, he gave me the slightest nod that served as both a reminder and a warning. Marcus had tried to speak out, and look what happened to him. Would I be smart enough to learn from his mistake? For the next 2 years, I kept my head down and did my job, and did not ask questions, and definitely did not talk about March 8, 2014. But the guilt was destroying me from the inside out. I started drinking to help me sleep, and to quiet the voices in my head that kept asking how I could live with myself knowing what I knew. My relationship with Sarah fell apart because I could not tell her what was wrong, and could not explain why I had become this hollow, paranoid shell of the person she had fallen in love with. I tried therapy, but how do you explain your trauma to someone when the truth is classified at the highest levels? How do you process guilt over something you can never discuss with anyone? The therapist thought I had post-traumatic stress disorder from some combat situation I could not talk about. She was not entirely wrong, I suppose. I was traumatized by war, just not the kind she was imagining in her analysis. The second major incident came 3 years after the disappearance, when I was scrolling through news sites and saw a headline that made my blood run cold with recognition. Independent journalist dies in apparent suicide after investigating Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 conspiracy theories. The article said that a freelance investigative journalist named Jennifer Rodriguez had been found dead in her apartment from an apparent drug overdose. According to the police report, she had been struggling with depression and had left a suicide note, but buried in the middle of the article was a detail that caught my attention immediately. Rodriguez had recently told friends she was close to breaking a major story about the disappearance of Flight 370 and was claiming she had evidence of a military cover-up. I felt sick to my stomach. This was the journalist Marcus had probably contacted before his death. She had been sitting on his information for 3 years, probably trying to verify it and probably looking for additional sources to corroborate his claims. And now she was dead too, with her investigation terminated along with her life. The message was clear to anyone paying attention. Anyone who tried to expose the truth about Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 would be silenced permanently. It did not matter if you were military personnel or a civilian journalist. The secret was too important and too dangerous to ever be allowed into public knowledge. But that is when I started to wonder what could be so important about a single commercial flight that governments would be willing to kill their own people to keep it secret. What was on that plane that justified not just one cover-up, but a sustained campaign of surveillance and intimidation and murder spanning years? I started digging carefully, using the access I still had to military databases. I could not look up anything directly related to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 without triggering alerts, but I could search for other things: cargo manifests from that time period and diplomatic movements and intelligence operations in Southeast Asia during March 2014. What I found made everything so much worse than I had imagined. 3 days before Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared, there had been a high-level intelligence meeting in Kuala Lumpur, with representatives from 5 countries discussing what the classified briefing notes called strategic asset transfer. The details were redacted, but the timing was suspicious, and one of the attendees at that meeting was a man named James Harrison, who was listed as a technical consultant with security clearances that went all the way to the top. I ran Harrison's name through every database I could access without raising flags. He was a ghost with no social media presence and no public records. But I found him mentioned in 3 other classified documents, always in connection with the same phrase, which was special weapons transport and security. Special weapons is the kind of phrase military intelligence uses when they do not want to write out what they are really talking about. Nuclear materials or biological agents or experimental technology, representing the kinds of things that countries move in absolute secrecy, because if the public knew they existed, there would be panic. And Harrison had been in Kuala Lumpur 3 days before Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared on the same flight that had been tracked by military radar, as it was escorted by unidentified fighter jets to an unknown destination. I will be honest with you and admit that for a while I convinced myself I was seeing patterns that were not there and making connections that did not exist in reality. Maybe Harrison's meeting and the flight disappearance were just coincidental. Maybe the escort aircraft were conducting a routine training exercise that just happened to coincide with the transponder failure. Maybe Marcus had really lost control of his car and Rodriguez really had committed suicide. But then I found the cargo manifest, and it took me 6 months of careful searching through archived files, but I finally located a copy of the official cargo list for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Most of it was exactly what you would expect to find on any commercial flight. Electronics and clothing and personal effects being shipped to Beijing. But there was one entry that stood out immediately. Diplomatic courier package with special handling required and consignee classified. Diplomatic courier packages are not unusual in international shipping, as countries ship classified materials all the time, but they do not usually do it on commercial flights, and they definitely do not list the consignee as classified. Normally, even in classified manifests, there is at least a department code or reference number. But this entry was scrubbed clean with no origin information and no destination department, and just confirmation that something requiring special handling and maximum security classification had been loaded onto that plane. Whatever was in that package was important enough that someone had chosen a commercial flight full of innocent civilians as cover for its transport, and important enough that when something went wrong, or when the operation got compromised, somehow the decision was made to escort the plane to a secret location rather than let it continue to Beijing, where the cargo might fall into the wrong hands. And every single person on that plane, including all 239 passengers and crew, became collateral damage in an operation that officially never happened. I am telling you this now because I do not have much time left. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter at my apartment with no return address and no postmark, just a single sheet of paper with a message typed in plain text. We know about the files you copied. We know about your research. You have one chance to comply. Destroy everything and forget you ever knew anything about March 8th, 2014. You have 72 hours. That was 14 days ago. I did not comply with their demands. Instead, I am putting together this statement and uploading copies to multiple locations online that are encrypted and set to release automatically if I do not check in with the system every 24 hours. If you are reading this, it means I am already dead or disappeared. It means the people who killed Marcus and Rodriguez and God knows how many others have finally come for me too. But before they do, you need to know something else that I discovered in the final weeks of my investigation. that makes this entire situation even more horrifying than you can imagine. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was not the first flight to disappear under mysterious circumstances while carrying classified cargo. Over the past 40 years, there have been at least 7 other commercial flights that vanished with similar patterns, including transponder failures and military radar tracking, that was never made public, and massive search operations that looked in all the wrong places. And every single one of these flights was carrying diplomatic packages with the same consignee classified notation in their cargo manifests. This is not just a cover-up of one incident, but is a systematic protocol for dealing with compromised transport operations. When a flight carrying sensitive cargo gets hijacked or intercepted or somehow compromised, there is an established procedure. Escort the aircraft to a secure location and extract the cargo, and then make sure nothing and no one ever resurfaces to tell the story. The massive search operation for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars and covered thousands of square miles of ocean floor, was not designed to find the plane. It was designed to convince the public that everything possible was being done while ensuring that the real crash site, wherever it actually was, would never be discovered by independent searchers. Think about it carefully. With all our satellite technology and with all our radar capabilities, and with all the resources of multiple governments coordinating the search, how does a Boeing 777 just vanish without a trace? The answer is simple. It does not vanish. Not unless someone with access to all that technology and all those resources wants it to vanish. Not unless the official search is deliberately looking in the wrong places while ensuring that no one else gets close to where the plane actually went down. I have spent 10 years carrying this knowledge, 10 years watching families grieve while knowing I had information that could help them, 10 years living in fear that every day might be my last because I knew too much about things that powerful people wanted kept secret. And I have spent every one of those days asking myself the same question. At what point does following orders become complicity in murder? Because that is what this is, murder. 239 people on that plane who died not because of mechanical failure or pilot error or even terrorism, but because they had the misfortune of being on a flight that was carrying something someone else wanted badly enough to kill for. And every person who has been part of the cover-up, and everyone who has helped maintain the lie, and everyone who has watched families suffer while sitting on the truth, we are all accomplices to those murders. Major Rahman retired 2 years after the incident. Last I heard, he was living in a comfortable house in the suburbs and collecting a generous military pension, and never losing a night's sleep over the role he played in one of history's greatest aviation mysteries. Captain Miller moved up the ranks and is now working directly for some 3-letter agency where his talent for keeping secrets and managing uncomfortable situations is probably considered an asset. And me, I am the last person from that radar room who is still alive and not completely absorbed into the system that created this lie. I am the last inconvenient witness to something that was never supposed to be witnessed, which is why I know my time is almost up. If you are watching this, and if this video has been released from its encrypted storage, it means I am gone. It means the people who have been watching me for 10 years finally decided I was too much of a liability. And it means you now carry the responsibility of deciding what to do with this information. I do not expect you to believe me. I know how this sounds. Conspiracy theory and paranoid delusions and the ramblings of someone who has been obsessing over a tragedy for too long. But I have included encrypted files with this video, including radar tracking data from that night, and screenshots of the cargo manifest, and documentation of the other disappeared flights with similar cargo notations and communications between military installations that officially never happened. You will need someone with serious technical skills to decrypt the files, and you should assume that attempting to access them will trigger alerts with multiple intelligence agencies, but it is all there. Everything I saw, and everything I know, and everything that got Marcus and Rodriguez, and probably a dozen other people killed. What you do with that information is up to you. You can choose to stay silent like I did for 10 years. You can tell yourself that sometimes secrets need to be kept for the greater good. You can decide that exposing this truth would cause more harm than letting the lie continue. Or you can do what Marcus tried to do and what Rodriguez died trying to do and what I should have done 10 years ago instead of living as a coward while families suffered. You can tell the truth regardless of the consequences and let those 239 victims finally have their real story told. Whatever you choose, remember this. The people who did this and the people who turned a commercial flight full of innocent civilians into a disposable asset in some intelligence operation, they are still out there. They are still operating. They are still moving classified cargo on commercial flights and still gambling with civilian lives in the name of national security. And they are absolutely willing to kill anyone who threatens to expose what they are doing. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 will not be the last flight to disappear under mysterious circumstances. As long as governments continue to use civilian aviation as cover for military and intelligence operations, and as long as the protocols for dealing with compromised cargo include the option of making an entire plane full of people vanish, this will happen again. Maybe not next year, and maybe not for a decade, but it will happen again because the system that allowed it to happen the first time is still in place. The families of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 deserve to know their loved ones did not die because of some inexplicable accident. They deserve to know that their fathers and mothers and sons and daughters were sacrificed for something, even if that something was ultimately just the protection of classified cargo and the maintenance of plausible deniability for intelligence operations. I know I cannot give them back their loved ones. I know this information will not undo the years of grief and uncertainty they have suffered, but at least they will know the truth. At least they will know that what happened was not random and was not inexplicable and was not just bad luck. It was a choice and a deliberate decision made by people in positions of power who decided that whatever they were protecting was worth more than 239 human lives. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people know the truth, and if enough people understand what really happens when civilian flights are used as cover for military operations, we can make sure this never happens again. Maybe we can create enough public pressure that governments have to change their protocols and have to find different ways to transport sensitive materials that do not involve gambling with civilian lives. I am not naive enough to think that exposing this will lead to justice for the victims or accountability for the people responsible. The kind of people who authorize these operations are too insulated and too protected by layers of classification and national security justifications. But at least the truth will be out there. At least the families will have some kind of answer, even if it is not the answer they wanted. Before I end this, I want to say something to Sarah and to my family and to everyone I hurt by living with this secret for so long. I am sorry I became someone you could not recognize. I am sorry I pushed you away. I am sorry I could not tell you what was destroying me from the inside. I hope someday you will understand that I was trying to protect you, even if my silence ended up hurting you more than the truth ever could have. And to the families of the victims, I am sorry I did not speak up sooner. I am sorry I let fear silence me for 10 years while you suffered. I am sorry I was part of the system that kept the truth from you. I hope this information, however late it comes, provides some measure of closure. Coordinates in the encrypted files will show you where military radar tracked that plane to before we were ordered to stop monitoring. I do not know if you will find anything there after all these years. I do not know if there is any evidence left to recover, but at least you will know where to look. At least you will have a real answer instead of the lies you have been fed for a decade. To whoever is watching this from whatever intelligence agency is monitoring communications for mentions of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, I know you are there. I know you are already tracing this upload and already trying to suppress it before it can spread. I know there are probably people on their way to my location right now, but it is too late. The information is out there. Multiple copies and multiple platforms and multiple encryption keys. You cannot contain it anymore. You can kill me, you probably will, but you cannot kill the truth. not anymore. For 10 years I have been living in fear and looking over my shoulder and wondering when you would finally decide I was too dangerous to leave alive. And I am tired. I am so tired of being afraid. I am tired of carrying this guilt. I am tired of knowing that my silence has been part of a machine that treats human lives as acceptable losses in the name of operational security. So go ahead, come for me. I have made my peace with whatever happens next. At least I will die knowing I finally did the right thing, even if it was 10 years too late. At least I will die knowing that Marcus's death was not completely in vain, and that Rodriguez's investigation was not buried forever, and that the truth about those 239 people is finally going to be told to everyone else. Do not trust the official story about Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Do not trust the theories about pilot suicide or mechanical failure or terrorism. The truth is simpler and more horrifying than any of those explanations. It was an intelligence operation that went wrong, and everyone on that plane became collateral damage in a cover-up that has been maintained for a decade through surveillance and intimidation and murder. The people responsible are never going to face justice in a court of law. They are too protected and too insulated by layers of classification and national security privilege. But at least now you know who they are and what they did. At least now the victims' stories have been told. At least now the families have some kind of answer, even if it is an answer that raises even more horrifying questions about what our governments are willing to do in the name of security. I do not know how much longer I have. Could be hours, or could be minutes, or could be that they have been listening to this entire recording and are already outside my door. But whatever time I have left, I am spending it getting this information uploaded and distributed as widely as possible. There is one more thing I need to tell you. Something I discovered just last week that finally explains why they have been so desperate to keep this secret. Why they were willing to kill Marcus and Rodriguez and anyone else who got too close to the truth. It is not just about the classified cargo, it is about what that cargo was being used for. I managed to track down a former intelligence analyst who worked in the same department as Captain Miller. She had left the service years ago and was dying of cancer, which meant she had nothing left to lose. When I showed her the documentation I had gathered, she went pale, then she started talking. The cargo on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was not being delivered to Beijing. It was being stolen from Beijing, or more accurately being prevented from reaching Beijing. The diplomatic package contained prototypes of quantum encryption technology that would have given China a 10-year advantage in secure communications. Technology that had been developed by a team of international scientists, some of whom were passengers on that flight. The operation was supposed to be simple: disable the transponder and escort the plane to a remote airfield and extract the cargo and the scientists, and then stage a crash in the Indian Ocean with no survivors. Clean and untraceable, the kind of operation intelligence agencies have been running for decades, but something went wrong. The pilots figured out what was happening. They tried to resist and tried to deviate from the planned route. That is when the decision was made to bring the plane down rather than risk it being recovered with evidence of the operation intact. The escort aircraft did not just guide Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 to its final destination. They ensured it never reached any destination at all. Every piece of wreckage that has been found and every bit of debris that has washed up on distant shores over the years, it has all been carefully managed and released at strategic times to keep the search going in the wrong direction and to maintain the illusion that we are still looking and still trying to solve the mystery when the people in charge have known exactly what happened since the moment it happened. The analyst told me something else, something that keeps me awake at night even more than everything else I have learned. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was not the first time they had used this protocol, and it will not be the last. There is a list, she said, a classified document that tracks every commercial flight that has been compromised for intelligence purposes over the past 50 years. Every plane that has been shot down or diverted or disappeared to protect operations or prevent technology transfer. The list has over 30 flights on it. 30 flights and thousands of people and decades of families destroyed by operations that officially never happened. And the protocol is still active and still being used and still turning innocent civilians into acceptable casualties in a shadow war most people do not even know exists. She gave me one more piece of information before she died. The code name for the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 operation, Deep Sleep Protocol. It is named after the contingency plan for what to do when a transport operation gets compromised and there is no way to extract the cargo without exposure. You put everyone involved into a permanent deep sleep. You make sure no witnesses survive. You make sure the evidence sinks so deep it will never be recovered. And you make sure that anyone who tries to expose what really happened gets put into their own deep sleep permanently. If this is the last thing I ever do, and if telling this truth is what finally gets me killed, at least it will be for something that matters. At least those 239 victims will have their story told. At least Marcus's courage and Rodriguez's investigation will not have been completely in vain. At least that dying analyst's final act of conscience will not be forgotten. Remember Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Remember that those people did not die because of some inexplicable accident. They died because someone decided their lives were worth less than protecting classified cargo. They died because the protocols for dealing with compromised intelligence operations include the option of making an entire plane full of people disappear. They died because we live in a world where governments are willing to lie to families for years rather than admit what really happened. And remember that it could happen again tomorrow. Every time you board a commercial flight, and every time someone you love gets on a plane, you are gambling that their flight will not be carrying classified cargo. You are gambling that some intelligence operation will not go wrong in a way that turns everyone on that plane into acceptable losses. You are gambling that your loved ones will not become the next entry on a classified list that tracks human lives like they are just operational statistics. The Deep Sleep Protocol is still active and still authorized at the highest levels of government and still ready to be deployed the next time a transport operation gets compromised. And nobody is going to stop using it unless enough people know it exists. Unless enough people understand that these disappearances are not mysteries. They are murder disguised as tragedy. The truth is out there now. What you do with it is up to you. But whatever you decide, remember this: silence is complicity. Every day that we allow these operations to continue, and every day that we accept the official lies about what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, we are giving permission for it to happen again. I am done being silent. I am done being complicit. Whatever happens next, at least I will face it knowing I finally told the truth. This is my testimony. This is my confession. This is everything I know about what really happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 on the night of March 8, 2014. And if I disappear tomorrow, and if I end up another convenient suicide or tragic accident, at least you will know why. At least you will know what truth was dangerous enough to get me killed. God help us all for what we have allowed to be done in the name of national security. And God help the families who have suffered for a decade because people like me were too afraid to tell them the truth. The files are encrypted with a key that has been redacted from this recording. The coordinates are redacted as well for security purposes. The truth is waiting for anyone brave enough to look for it. But be warned, because once you know what I know, and once you have seen what I have seen, you cannot unknow it. You cannot unsee it. And you will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder and wondering if today is the day they decide you know too much. That is the price of truth in a world built on lies. That is the cost of speaking up when powerful people want you to stay silent. I have paid that price for 10 years now. It is someone else's turn to carry this burden. Good luck to whoever finds this, and good luck to whoever decides to continue this investigation. You are going to need it. The system that killed Marcus and Rodriguez and that dying analyst is still operating. The people who authorized the Deep Sleep Protocol are still in positions of power. The infrastructure that allows governments to make commercial flights disappear is still intact and still being used. And they are watching, always watching, waiting for the next person who gets too close to the truth so they can eliminate that threat before it becomes public. I have done everything I can to protect this information and to ensure it reaches people who will know what to do with it. I have created dead man switches and encrypted backups and automated release systems. But I am just one person with limited resources going up against organizations with unlimited budgets and decades of experience in making problems disappear. So I need you to help me. I need you to share this information. I need you to verify what I am telling you. I need you to dig deeper and find the evidence I could not access. I need you to pressure governments for transparency. I need you to demand answers for those families. I need you to make enough noise that they cannot silence everyone who knows the truth, because that is the only way this ends. Not through one person speaking out, but through enough people knowing the truth that it becomes impossible to suppress. Not through secret whistleblowers and encrypted files, but through public awareness and sustained pressure for accountability. Not through individual acts of courage that get people killed, but through collective action that is too big to stop. I know I am asking a lot. I know most people who see this will dismiss it as conspiracy theory. I know even people who believe me will be too scared to act on that belief. I know the forces arrayed against the truth are powerful and ruthless and have been operating in the shadows for decades. But I also know that truth has a way of coming out eventually, that lies cannot be maintained forever, that every cover-up eventually collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has already become one of history's greatest mysteries. Countless theories have been proposed and debunked. Massive resources have been devoted to searching in all the wrong places. Families have spent a decade in agonizing uncertainty. And through it all, the truth has been sitting in classified databases and radar logs and cargo manifests, waiting for someone to piece it together. I have pieced it together. I have connected the dots that were never supposed to be connected. I have followed the evidence that was supposed to stay hidden. I have spoken to witnesses who were supposed to stay silent. And I have compiled documentation that proves beyond any reasonable doubt that the official story is a lie. But documentation is not enough, evidence is not enough, even proof is not enough if nobody sees it or if everyone who sees it is too scared to act on it. That is why I am releasing this now despite knowing what it will cost me. That is why I am breaking my silence despite 10 years of threats and surveillance and intimidation. That is why I am risking everything I have left to make sure this information gets out. Because those 239 people deserve better than to be forgotten casualties in a classified operation. Because their families deserve better than a decade of lies and misdirection. Because Marcus and Rodriguez and everyone else who died trying to expose this truth deserve to have their sacrifice mean something. And because if we let this stand, and if we allow governments to literally make planes full of people disappear without consequence, then we are complicit in whatever comes next. The deep sleep protocol exists. It is real, it is documented, it is still active, and it will be used again unless enough people know about it to make its use politically impossible. That is what I am asking you to do. Make this public. Make this known, make this impossible to ignore. Do not let them bury this story the way they have buried so many others. Do not let them intimidate you into silence. Do not let fear of consequences stop you from doing what is right. I have lived with that fear for 10 years, and I can tell you it is worse than any consequence they can inflict. The fear never goes away. The guilt never lessens. The knowledge that you had the power to help people and chose not to because you were scared destroys you slowly from the inside. I do not want that for you. I do not want you to spend years looking over your shoulder and wondering when they are coming for you. I do not want you to live with the crushing weight of knowing truth that you are too afraid to speak. So if you are going to share this information, do it quickly, do it publicly, do it in a way that makes it impossible for them to contain. Do not try to be clever or careful or strategic. Do not think you can negotiate with these people or that they will leave you alone if you are smart about how you release information. They will come for you either way. The only question is whether the truth gets out before they do. I have set up this system to release automatically, but automatic systems can fail. Encryption can be broken. Dead man switches can be disabled. That is why I need human beings with free will and moral courage to take this information and run with it. Share it everywhere. Send it to journalists and investigators and government officials and human rights organizations. Post it on social media and conspiracy forums and anywhere else people might see it. Make copies and backups and redundancies, translate it into other languages, add your own research and evidence to it. Turn this from one person's testimony into a movement that demands answers. I am under no illusions about what happens next for me personally. I know they are coming. I know this recording might be the last thing I ever do. I know that by the time you see this, I will probably already be gone. But I also know that my death will prove everything I have been saying. That a radar technician who witnessed the truth about Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 died under mysterious circumstances shortly after releasing this information. That will be evidence in itself. That will be confirmation that everything I have told you is real and dangerous and worth killing to protect. So use my death if it comes to that. Use it as proof. Use it as motivation. Use it to show other potential whistleblowers what happens when you try to speak out alone, but also what can be accomplished if enough people speak out together. The people who run these operations rely on silence and isolation. They rely on witnesses being too scared to come forward. They rely on the public being too skeptical or too distracted to pay attention to stories like this. They rely on the enormity of what they have done being too much for people to believe. But that reliance is also their weakness, because if enough people overcome that fear, and if enough people pay attention, and if enough people believe the evidence even when it seems impossible, then the whole system of secrecy and lies collapses. I am one person, and they can easily make me disappear, but if this information reaches 10 people, or 100 people, or 1,000 people, then it becomes exponentially harder to suppress. And if those people share it with others, and if independent investigators start verifying what I am claiming, and if pressure builds for official inquiries, then maybe, just maybe, we can force some measure of accountability. I do not expect justice. I do not expect anyone to go to prison for what they did. I do not expect governments to admit their role in this atrocity. But I do expect that if enough people know the truth, the deep sleep protocol will become too politically toxic to use again. And that alone would be worth everything this has cost me. It would mean future flights carrying classified cargo would not be allowed to simply disappear. It would mean future families would not have to spend decades in agonizing uncertainty. It would mean future whistleblowers might have a chance of speaking out without being killed. That is the best outcome I can hope for at this point. Not vindication or recognition or protection, but simply the knowledge that I have made it slightly harder for this to happen again. That I have shone a light into a dark corner that powerful people wanted to keep hidden, that I have honored the memory of Marcus and Rodriguez and those 239 victims by refusing to let their stories be erased. If you have watched this far, then you understand the magnitude of what I am telling you. You understand that this is not just about one missing plane or one cover-up, but about a systematic protocol that has been used dozens of times over decades. You understand that governments have been using civilian aviation as cover for intelligence operations, and that when those operations are compromised, the solution is to make everyone involved disappear permanently. You understand that the people responsible for this are still in power and still operating and still willing to kill to protect their secrets. And you understand that I am probably already dead by the time you see this. So now the question becomes, what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to dismiss it as the paranoid ravings of someone who has lost touch with reality? Are you going to tell yourself that surely governments would not do something this monstrous? Are you going to decide that it is not your problem and go back to your comfortable life, pretending you never saw this? Or are you going to have the courage to look at the evidence I have provided and verify it for yourself? Are you going to dig into the publicly available information about Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and notice all the inconsistencies in the official story? Are you going to research the other flights on that classified list and see the patterns that connect them? Are you going to contact the families of victims and tell them that someone who was there that night is finally telling them what really happened? I cannot make that choice for you. I can only present the truth as I know it and hope that someone somewhere will have the courage to act on it. But I want you to understand something important. If you choose to pursue this, and if you choose to verify what I am claiming, and if you choose to go public with your findings, then you need to be prepared for what comes next. They will come after you. They will surveil you and intimidate you and threaten the people you love. They will try to discredit you and destroy your reputation and make you look crazy. They will use every tool at their disposal to silence you before your message can spread. And if those methods do not work, they will kill you just like they killed Marcus and Rodriguez, and just like they are probably killing me right now. I am not telling you this to scare you away from the truth, but to make sure you understand what you are getting into. This is not a game. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is not something you can dabble in and then walk away from when it gets uncomfortable. Once you start down this path, there is no going back. Once they identify you as a threat, you are marked for life. Once you know what I know, you carry that burden forever. So if you are going to do this, then do it right. Do not try to investigate quietly or carefully or without leaving traces. That approach got Marcus killed. Do not trust that you can verify the information and then decide later whether to go public. That approach got Rodriguez killed. Do not think you can outsmart them or stay one step ahead or protect yourself through clever operational security. I have been trying to do that for 10 years and look where it has gotten me. The only way to survive this is to go completely public immediately. Release everything you know to as many people as possible as quickly as possible. Make yourself too visible to disappear quietly. Make the information too widespread to contain. Make enough noise that killing you would only draw more attention to what you are revealing. It is not a guarantee of safety. They have killed people who went public before, but it is better odds than trying to stay in the shadows while they hunt you. And even if it does not save your life, it ensures that your death serves a purpose. That the truth gets out even if you do not survive to see it. I know this is a lot to ask. I know most people are not prepared to sacrifice their safety or their lives for a cause. I know the rational thing to do is walk away and pretend you never saw this. But I am asking anyway because I do not know who else to ask, because the families of those victims deserve answers, because the truth matters even when it is dangerous, because someone needs to stand up and say that what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was wrong and that the people responsible need to be held accountable. And because if good people continue to stay silent out of fear, then the people who run these operations will keep running them forever. They will keep using civilian flights as cover for intelligence work. They will keep implementing the deep sleep protocol when operations get compromised. They will keep killing innocent people and lying to their families and threatening anyone who tries to expose the truth. The only way it stops is if enough people refuse to be silent, if enough people demand transparency, if enough people insist that human lives matter more than operational security. I am doing my part by releasing this information. Now I need you to do yours by spreading it and verifying it and refusing to let it be buried. Before I finish this, I want to address something that I know many of you are thinking. You are wondering if I am really telling the truth or if this is all an elaborate hoax. You are wondering if I am mentally ill or if I have been manipulated into believing false information. You are wondering if there is a simpler explanation for everything I have described. Those are fair questions. I would be asking them too if I were in your position, so let me address them directly. First, regarding whether this is a hoax. I have included encrypted files with this video that contain radar data and cargo manifests and classified communications. Those files can be verified by experts who know what to look for. The timestamps and radar signatures and document formats all match what you would expect from genuine military and intelligence materials. Could I have fabricated all of that? Theoretically, yes, but it would require resources and expertise far beyond what a single radar technician would have access to. And more importantly, it would require me to know details about classified systems and protocols that I could not possibly know unless I had actually worked with them. Second, regarding my mental health. Yes, I have struggled with trauma and paranoia and guilt for the past 10 years. Yes, I have been drinking too much and sleeping too little and seeing threats everywhere I look. But trauma does not mean I am wrong about what caused that trauma. Paranoia does not mean the threats are not real. The fact that this experience has damaged me psychologically does not invalidate the truth of what I am telling you. In fact, the psychological damage is itself evidence that something terrible happened. People do not develop this kind of post-traumatic stress from imagining things. They develop it from witnessing things that should never have happened. Third, regarding simpler explanations, could there be a more innocent explanation for why Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared? Could the transponder have failed due to electrical problems and the plane crashed into the ocean exactly where search teams have been looking? Could I have misinterpreted what I saw on radar that night? Could Marcus have really died in an accident and Rodriguez really committed suicide? Yes, all of those things are theoretically possible. But when you look at the totality of evidence, the simpler explanation is the one I am giving you. The plane was tracked continuously by military radar. It was escorted by unidentified military aircraft. It was carrying classified cargo. Everyone who tried to speak out about what they knew died under suspicious circumstances. And I have spent 10 years being surveilled and intimidated and threatened to keep me silent. That is not the profile of an innocent tragedy. That is the profile of a cover-up. So I ask you to look at the evidence with an open mind. Do not assume I am telling the truth, but do not assume I am lying either. Verify what I am claiming. Check the facts that can be checked. Talk to experts who can analyze the technical details. Contact families of victims and ask if anything about the official story has ever seemed off to them. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions, but do it quickly because time is running out. The longer this information stays hidden, the more likely it is to be suppressed permanently. The longer families wait for answers, the more they suffer. The longer these protocols remain in place, the more likely they are to be used again. I have done everything I can to ensure this information survives, even if I do not. But information alone is not enough. It needs people to believe it and share it and act on it. It needs you to be brave enough to look at uncomfortable truths and strong enough to demand accountability from powerful people. It needs you to care more about justice for victims than about your own safety. I know that is asking a lot. I know most people will not be willing to take that risk, but I only need a few people who are willing, a few journalists who will investigate the story, a few technical experts who will verify the data, a few activists who will pressure governments for transparency, a few ordinary people who will share the information and refuse to let it be forgotten. If I can reach those few people, then everything I have sacrificed will have been worth it. Marcus's death will have meant something. Rodriguez's investigation will have borne fruit. Those 239 victims will finally have their story told. And maybe, just maybe, we can prevent this from happening again. That is all I can hope for at this point. Not that I will survive or that I will be vindicated or that people will remember me as anything other than a conspiracy theorist. Just that the truth will get out and that it will make some small difference in how governments conduct these operations going forward. If I can achieve that, then I can die knowing I finally did something that mattered. That I finally stood up for what was right even though it cost me everything. That I finally honored the memory of everyone who has been sacrificed to protect these secrets. This is the end of my testimony. I have told you everything I know. I have provided you with all the evidence I could gather. I have explained the risks and the stakes and what I am asking you to do. Now it is up to you. The truth is in your hands. What you do with it will determine whether those 239 people died for nothing or whether their deaths finally expose a system that has been operating in the shadows for far too long. Choose wisely, choose bravely, and whatever you choose, remember that silence has a cost too, that doing nothing is itself a choice, that every day we allow these lies to stand is another day we betray the victims and their families. I hope you will choose truth over comfort. I hope you will choose courage over fear. I hope you will choose to honor the dead by refusing to let their stories be erased. But even if you do not, I will die knowing I tried, that I told the truth when it mattered, that I stood up when others stayed silent, and that maybe somewhere someone will hear this message and find the strength to finish what I started. There is one final piece of information I need to share before I end this recording, and it is perhaps the most disturbing thing I have uncovered in all my years of investigating what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. I mentioned earlier that I had found a classified list documenting other commercial flights that had disappeared under similar circumstances over the past 50 years. What I did not tell you is what I discovered when I cross-referenced that list with major geopolitical events and technology transfers during those same time periods. Every single flight on that list disappeared during a critical moment in the global balance of power. Every single one was carrying either advanced technology or key personnel or classified materials that would have shifted strategic advantages between nations. And every single disappearance was followed by policy changes or treaty negotiations or power shifts that benefited the countries that had the most to gain from those flights never reaching their destinations. This is not a coincidence. This is not a series of tragic accidents. This is a deliberate strategy that has been employed by intelligence agencies for half a century to control the flow of technology and information and power around the world. The Deep Sleep Protocol is not just a contingency plan for when operations go wrong. It is an active tool of statecraft used to prevent rival nations from acquiring capabilities that would threaten Western dominance. And Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was just the most recent example of this strategy in action. The quantum encryption technology that was being transported on that flight would have given China a decisive advantage in secure communications. It would have allowed them to protect their military and diplomatic and economic communications from any form of interception or decryption. It would have rendered decades of Western intelligence gathering efforts obsolete overnight. So the decision was made at the highest levels of government that the technology could not be allowed to reach Beijing, that the scientists who had developed it needed to be prevented from sharing their knowledge with Chinese researchers, that the prototypes needed to be seized or destroyed before they could be replicated, and that the 239 innocent people who happened to be on that flight were acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of those strategic objectives. I want you to think about what that means. Think about the coldness of that calculation. Think about government officials sitting in secure conference rooms looking at intelligence, reports, and making the decision that hundreds of civilian lives were worth sacrificing to maintain technological superiority. Think about them authorizing the operation knowing full well that families would be destroyed, and that lies would have to be maintained for years, and that anyone who discovered the truth would have to be silenced permanently. And then think about the fact that they made this decision not in the heat of war or in response to an immediate threat, but simply as a matter of policy, simply because it was strategically advantageous, simply because they had the power to do it and believed they could get away with it. That is the world we actually live in, not the world of international law and human rights and accountability that we are taught to believe in, but a world where powerful nations do whatever they want to maintain their power and then lie about it afterwards. A world where civilian lives are just variables in strategic calculations. A world where the truth is whatever the people with the biggest guns and the most sophisticated surveillance systems say it is. And the most terrifying part is that this system works. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has been missing for over a decade now. And despite massive search efforts and countless theories and global media attention, the truth has never come close to being exposed until now. The families still do not know what happened. The public still believes it was some kind of inexplicable accident. The governments responsible have faced no consequences whatsoever. and the deep sleep protocol remains active and ready to be deployed again whenever it is deemed necessary. I have spent the last few weeks since receiving that final warning trying to understand how we got here. How do we reach a point where democratic governments feel entitled to murder their own citizens and the citizens of allied nations in pursuit of strategic objectives? How do we create systems of secrecy so impenetrable that these operations can be carried out without any meaningful oversight or accountability? How do we allow the concept of national security to be stretched so far that it justifies literally anything, including mass murder? And I keep coming back to the same answer. We got here because good people stayed silent, because whistleblowers were intimidated into compliance, because journalists were threatened or killed when they got too close to the truth, because the public was too trusting of official narratives and too quick to dismiss alternative explanations as conspiracy theories, because everyone involved in these systems convinced themselves that they were just following orders, or just doing their jobs, or just protecting national security. We got here through 1,000 small acts of cowardice and complicity, through choosing safety over truth, through prioritizing our own comfort over justice for victims, through accepting that some things are too dangerous to know and some secrets are too important to expose. And we will stay here unless enough people find the courage to say no, to refuse to participate in these systems, to speak out even when it costs them everything, to demand accountability even when powerful people insist that national security requires secrecy, to believe victims and whistleblowers even when official sources tell us they are lying or crazy. I am saying no. After 10 years of cowardice, I am finally refusing to participate in this lie. After a decade of choosing my own safety over the truth, I am finally accepting the consequences of speaking out. After all this time spent watching families suffer while I stayed silent, I am finally doing what I should have done on March 8, 2014. I am telling the truth regardless of what it costs me, and I am asking you to do the same, not to put yourself in danger unnecessarily, not to throw your life away on a symbolic gesture, but to do whatever you can within your own sphere of influence to resist these systems of secrecy and lies. If you are a journalist, investigate this story and publish what you find even if your editors try to kill it. If you are a technical expert, analyze the data I have provided and speak publicly about whether it appears authentic. If you are a government employee with access to classified information, look for corroborating evidence and find a way to leak it safely. If you are a family member of someone who was on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, demand answers and refuse to accept the official narrative. If you are just an ordinary person, share this video and talk about it, and keep the conversation alive until it becomes impossible to ignore. Every person who does something, no matter how small, makes it harder for them to maintain the cover-up. Every act of courage inspires others to be brave. Every crack in the wall of secrecy makes it easier for the next person to break through. This is how change happens. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through ordinary people making the choice to stand up for truth even when it is difficult or dangerous. Through enough people refusing to be complicit that the systems of oppression and secrecy cannot function anymore. Through collective action that is too widespread to suppress through intimidation or violence. I know I will not live to see that change. I know the people coming for me right now will make sure I never speak publicly about this again. But I have hope that this recording will survive and that it will reach people who have the courage to carry on the work I am leaving unfinished. I have hope that Marcus and Rodriguez did not die for nothing. I have hope that those 239 victims will finally have their story told. And I have hope that maybe someday the deep sleep protocol will be exposed and abolished, and that no future families will have to suffer the way these families have suffered. That hope is what has kept me going through 10 years of fear and guilt and isolation. That hope is what gave me the strength to finally speak out despite knowing what it would cost. That hope is what I am passing on to you now as I prepare for whatever comes next. The truth is a powerful thing. It cannot be destroyed no matter how hard people try. It cannot be contained forever no matter how sophisticated the systems of secrecy. It cannot be killed even if the people who speak it are silenced. Because truth has a way of surviving, of finding cracks to slip through, of reaching people who will carry it forward even when the original messenger is gone. I am one messenger and they can silence me easily enough. But this truth is bigger than me. It exists in classified databases and radar logs and cargo manifests. It exists in the memories of everyone who was involved in the operation. It exists in the evidence scattered across the Indian Ocean waiting to be found. It exists in the pain of families who have never quite believed the official story. And now it exists in this recording and in whatever encrypted files survive my death. That truth will outlive me. It will outlive everyone who has tried to suppress it. And eventually it will come to light no matter how long that takes or how many people have to suffer before it does. My final words are for the families of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. I am so sorry for what you have endured. I am sorry for the lies you have been told and the false hope you have been given and the years of uncertainty you have suffered. I am sorry I did not speak up sooner when my testimony might have given you some measure of peace. And I am sorry that even now, even with everything I am telling you, I cannot give you back your loved ones or undo the pain you have experienced. But I want you to know that they did not die because of pilot error or mechanical failure or any of the other explanations you have been given. They died because they were on a flight carrying something that powerful people wanted to control. They died because the protocols for protecting classified operations include making entire planes full of people disappear. They died because governments decided that maintaining strategic advantages was more important than human lives. And they died because people like me were too afraid to tell the truth about what we witnessed. That is not the answer you wanted. That is not the closure you deserve, but it is the truth, and after 10 years of lies, I owe you at least that much. Your loved ones were not lost. They were taken. They were sacrificed. They were murdered as part of an intelligence operation that officially never happened, and the people responsible have never faced justice and probably never will, but at least now you know. At least now you can stop wondering if there was something more that could have been done or some explanation that makes sense of the senseless. At least now you can direct your anger at the people who actually deserve it instead of at pilots or airlines or fate. And at least now you can know that your loved ones are not forgotten, that their story is being told, that someone who was there that night is finally speaking up on their behalf. I hope that provides some small measure of comfort. I hope that knowing the truth, even a painful truth, is better than living with uncertainty. And I hope that you will use this information to demand accountability from the governments that did this to you. They owe you more than lies and misdirection. They owe you the truth and an apology, and whatever justice can still be achieved after all these years. This is the end. I have said everything I came here to say. I have released all the information I can release. I have done everything in my power to ensure this truth survives even if I do not. Now it is up to others to decide what to do with it. As I finish this recording, I can hear vehicles pulling up outside my apartment. I can hear footsteps in the hallway. I can hear voices coordinating on radios. They are here just as I knew they would be, just as I have been expecting for 10 years, but I am not afraid anymore. I made my choice. I told the truth. I honored the memory of everyone who died because of these secrets. And whatever happens next, I will face it knowing I finally did the right thing. To everyone watching this, remember Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Remember the deep sleep protocol. Remember that governments are willing to murder innocent people to protect their strategic interests. And remember that silence is complicity. The only way this ends is if enough people refuse to stay silent. Good luck, God bless, and may the truth finally set us all free. If this testimony has reached you, it means I am gone, but the truth remains. Share this information widely before it can be suppressed and demand answers for the 239 souls who were erased from history. The deep sleep protocol must be exposed, and only you can ensure this truth survives long enough to make that happen.